Assalamualaikum everyone, we are from group 6 and we will present about two kinds of reasoning for part 2. This is our team members, Syamimi, Huda Hidayah, Pushri Nabila, Nur Fahana and Nur Ali Atika. This is the contents that we will cover for today. I will start this presentation with deduction reasoning. What is deduction reasoning? Deduction reasoning is a logical approach where you progress from general ideas or premise to specific conclusions. For example, all humans need oxygen to survive. This is general premise. Sarah is a human. This is more specific premise. And Sarah needs oxygen to survive. This is the specific conclusions. Deduction reasoning have 5 types of common patterns, which is hypothetical syllogism, categorical syllogism, argument by elimination, argument based on mathematics, and argument from definition. Next, this is the mind map that I create to increase understanding so that you can see the overall of deductive reasoning that I will cover for today. From this mind map, you can see that deductive reasoning have 5 types of pattern, and the first pattern, which is hypothetical syllogism, will divide into 5 more types, which is modus ponens, modus tollens, change argument, affirming the consequence, denying the antecedent. The first type of deduction reasoning is hypothetical syllogism. Okay, syllogism is a 3-line argument that includes 2 premises and a conclusion. Hypothetical syllogism is a syllogism that contains at least one hypothetical or conditional premise, which is if-then. Under this hypothetical syllogism, we have modus ponens. Modus ponens include one conditional premise, a second premise, and a conclusion. The pattern is if A, then B. A, therefore B. For example, if I want to keep my financial aid, I will be study hard. I do want to keep my financial aid. Therefore, I will be study hard. I will better study hard. Next, chain arguments. When we mention chain, it must be about link or about connection between them. So, chain arguments include 3 conditional statements that link together in its pattern. The pattern is if A then B, if B then C, therefore if A then C. The example is if we don't stop for gas soon, then we will run out of gas. If we run out of gas, then we will be late for the wedding. Therefore, if we don't stop for gas soon, we will be late for the wedding. So can you see the connection between them? Like if you don't stop for gas soon, and then we will run out of gas. When we run out of gas, then we will be late for the wedding. Next, modus tollens. Modus tollens, also called denying the consequence. It includes one conditional premise, a second premise that denies the consequence of the conditional, and a conclusion that denies the antecedent of the conditional. The pattern is if A then B, not B, therefore not A. For example, if we are in Sacramento, then we are in California. We are not in California, therefore we are not in Sacramento. Next, denying the antecedent. The pattern is if A then B, not A, therefore not B. For example, if Shakespeare wrote War and Peace, then he's a great writer. Shakespeare didn't write War and Peace, therefore Shakespeare is not a great writer. The premises are true, but the conclusion is false. So this argument is not logically reliable. But although this is not logically reliable, it's still under deductive reasoning because it still uses the same pattern, which is if-then. So next, affirming consequence. The consequence. If A, the pattern is if A then B, B therefore A. For example, if we are on Neptune, then we are in the solar system. We are in the solar system, therefore we are on Neptune. So it has 2 premises but a false conclusion. So it's also not a logically reliable pattern of reasoning, but still, it's it's still under deductive reasoning because it still uses the same pattern, which is if then. In this example, we can see that although we are in the solar system doesn't mean we are on Neptune, because the solar system have a lot of other planets. Maybe Earth, maybe we are on Earth. Doesn't mean we are on Neptune. Next, second types of deductive reasoning is categorical syllogism. It also defined as a three-line argument in which each statement begins with the word like all, some, or no. For example, all oaks are trees, all trees are plants, so all oak are plants. Next, I will pass this presentation to the next person.
Thank you, Mimi, for your presentation. So next, it's my turn. So guys, what is argument by elimination? An argument by elimination seeks to logically rule out various possibilities until only a single possibility remains. Did you get it? It's okay, I will explain more. So, an argument of the first form begins by identifying all the possibilities. It then eliminates all possibilities but only one and concludes that this remaining possibility must be actual. So, let's take a look at the first example. My keys are either next to my bed, on the coffee table, or in my coat pocket. My keys are not next to my bed. My keys are not on the coffee table. So, probably my keys are in my coat pocket. Did you get it? It's okay. I will show you the second example. Either Joe walked to the library or he drove. But Joe didn't drive to the library. Therefore, Joe walked to the library. So, the aim of such argument is to logically exclude every possible outcome except one. Such arguments are always deductive. Moving on to the next one, which is argument based on mathematics. Mathematics is a model of logical, step-by-step reasoning. The arguments prove that conclusion is on the basis of precise mathematical concepts and reasoning. The conclusion is claimed to depend largely or entirely on some mathematical calculation or measurement. So, let's take a look at the first example. 8 is greater than 4. 4 is greater than 2. Therefore, 8 is greater than 2. Are you guys understand it? It's okay. I will give you a clear picture. Let's take a look at the next example. So, Mark has twice as many cats as Susan's. So, Susan has 3 cats. Therefore, Mark has 6 cats. Because it says Mark has twice as many cats as Susan. So, Susan has 3 cats. So, 3 times by 2 equals 6. So, Mark has 6 cats. So, it shows here is argument based on mathematics are usually best treated as deductive. But guys, however, argument based on mathematics can also be inductive. How it could be? So, here is the example. My blind uncle told me that there were 8 men, 6 women, and 12 kids at the party. By simple addition, therefore, it follows that there were 26 people at the party. Here, the conclusion clearly does not follow from the premise because it's possible for the premise to be true and the conclusion is false. Maybe my blind uncle miscounted, for example. So, for that reason, the argument is best treated as inductive, being true by definition. That is, as following simply by definition from some keyword or phrase used in the argument. So, here are the 2 examples. Janelle is a cardiologist. Therefore, Janelle is also a doctor. Second one, Bertha is an aunt. It follows that she is a woman. So you can see the clear picture of it. Janelle is cardiologist. Cardiologist basically a doctor. And Bertha is an aunt. And of course, obviously, is a woman. So, because a statement that follows by definition is necessarily true, if the relevant definition is true, arguments from definition are always deductive. To summarize all this, our discussion of common patterns of deductive reasoning can be summarized as follows. So, arguments by elimination and arguments from definition should always be treated as deductive. Secondly, logically reliable hypothetical syllogism, categorical syllogism, and arguments based on mathematics should always be treated as deductive. And lastly, logically unreliable hypothetical syllogism, categorical syllogism, and argument based on mathematics should be treated as deductive unless there is a clear evidence that they are intended to be inductive.
So now we move on to the second kind of reasoning, which is inductive reasoning. So for inductive reasoning, unlike deductive reasoning which guarantees its conclusion, inductive reasoning supports a probable but not certain conclusion based on the evidence given. So inductive reasoning usually use words like probably, likely, or it's reasonable to believe, as it wants to show that conclusions are probable and not absolute. So for example, observing that each discovered dinosaur bone is old might lead to the inductive conclusion that all dinosaur bones are old. So, as we can see from the example, it shows how inductive reasoning works. If one keeps finding old dinosaur bones, they might start to believe that all dinosaur bones must be old. However, this definitely not guaranteed to be correct. Okay, so there are 6 types of inductive reasoning, which is the first one is inductive generalization, the second one is predictive argument, the third one is argument from authority, the fourth one is causal argument, the next one is statistical argument, and the last one is argument from analogy. Okay, for the first one is inductive generalization. For this type of inductive reasoning, it infers that what is true of a sample is most likely true for the whole group. So, it uses characteristics of a sample group to make a statement about the larger population. For example, most survey college students in Terengganu work part-time. This makes a conclusion that most college students in Malaysia overall work part-time. So from the example, we can see that it uses a sample group, which is college students in Terengganu, to make a statement about a larger population, which is students in Malaysia overall. So, for a good inductive generalizations, it depends on a large representative sample. If the sample is too small or biased, the generalization might be unreliable. So, for example, if we want to study about students in UNISA overall, we must use a bigger sample, such as some students from different faculties instead of just one, so that the conclusion might be more reliable. The next one is predictive argument. For predictive argument, it makes conclusion about the future based on observed past patterns. So, this argument assumes that patterns observed previously will likely continue even though there's no guarantee. For example, it has rained every February in Tokyo. This makes conclusions that it will rain next February too. As you can see from the example, it refers to the observed past pattern, which is every February, and conclude that the next February will also be raining. This is of course will not 100% guarantee. So, since the future events can be known for certain, predictions are always probabilistic. The third one is argument from authority. So, For this argument, it basically relies on the statement or expertise of trusted sources to support a conclusion. It is common for topics where specific expertise is valuable, such as scientific conclusion. So, if an authority figure like a doctor, scientist, or professor support a claim, it's likely to be true, but still not guaranteed. For example, trusting a doctor's advice on a medical issue is most likely to be correct, but based on their expertise. But still, they are human, and it is not 100% guaranteed. Authorities can make errors, so while these arguments are strong, they are still inductive and rely on the credibility of the authority figure. This means that even though arguments based on what authorities say can be convincing, they are not 100% certain. Authorities can sometimes make mistakes, so these arguments are still considered inductive.
What is a causal argument? At its core, a causal argument asserts or denies that one thing is the cause of another. This type of arguments focus specifically on how certain actions or events lead to particular problems or situations. Essentially, causal arguments help us answer critical questions such as how did things get to be the way they are, or why did something happen? By engaging with these questions, we can uncover the underlying factors that shape our experiences and the world around us. The importance of causal arguments. Causal arguments hold significant importance in our discussions and analysis. Often, when people encounter challenges, whether they are personal, societal, or global, they seek to understand the reasons behind these challenges. However, they may not always have access to all the information or insights necessary to fully grasp the situations. This is where a well-structured causal argument can make a difference. In our causal argument, we have the opportunity to clarify these complex relationships. We can guide our audience through the process of understanding how one event leads to another. By doing so, we not only provide insight but also empower others to engage more deeply with the topic at hand. So, let's move to crafting a causal argument. When constructing a causal argument, it's essential to focus on a few components. The first one is assert the cause and effect. Begin by clearly stating what you believe is the cause and what the effect is. This clarity sets the foundations for your argument. Second one is address the how and why. Dive into the specific of how the cause lead to the effect. The third one is provide context that answers the questions. How did we arrive at these situations? Why did this event occur? Fourth is support with evidence. Use relevant examples, data, or anecdotes to support your claims. This evidence not only strengthens your arguments but also helps your audience connect with your points on a deeper level. To conclude, causal arguments are vital tools for understanding the intricate relationships that shape our world. They allow us to assert or deny the connection between events, and they empower us to clarify complex situations for ourselves and others. Next, what is a statistical argument? A statistical argument rests on statistical evidence, meaning it uses data to demonstrate that a certain percentage of a group or class exhibits a particular characteristic. This type of argument is a reasoning process that involves the collections, analysis, and interpretations of data to draw conclusions about a population or phenomenon. By using statistical evidence, we can make informed inference or predictions. This is particularly valuable in a world where data drives decision making. making across numerous disciplines. Creating a strong statistical argument involves several key components. The first one is data collections. The first step is gathering relevant data. This can be done through various methods, such as surveys, experiments, or observational studies. The quality and relevance of the data collected are crucial for the validity of the arguments. Second is statistical analysis. Once the data is collected, the next step is applying statistical methods to analyze it. Techniques like regression analysis or hypothesis testing help us understand patterns and relationships within the data. This analysis is essential for uncovering insights that inform our conclusion. The third one is interpretations. After analyzing the data, we need to draw conclusions based on the findings. This often involves assessing the strength and significance of the results. Are the findings statistically significant? What do they imply about the population or phenomenon being studied? Our interpretations help us understand the implications of the data. The fourth one is presentation. Finally, it's important to clearly communicate the result of the analysis. This is often done through graphs, tables, and visualizations that make the argument compelling and easily understandable. Effective presentations help engage the audience and highlights the key takeaway from the data. The next one is application of statistical arguments. Statistical arguments are prevalent in various fields, including the first one is science. Researchers use statistical arguments to validate hypotheses and draw conclusions from experimental data. For example, clinical trials rely on statistical analysis to determine the efficacy of new drugs. Second one is economics. Economists utilize statistical data to analyze market trends, forecast economic conditions, and inform policy decisions. For instance, unemployment rates and inflation statistics can guide government policies. And the third one is social science. In fields like psychology and sociology, statistical arguments help researchers understand behaviors and societal trends. Surveys and observational studies provide data that inform theories and practice. So, statistical arguments are powerful tools that allow us to draw, inform, and conclusion based by data. By collecting, analyzing, interpreting, and presenting statistical evidence, we can support claims, inform decisions, and guide policy making across various disciplines. What is an argument from energy? An argument from energy, also known as analogical reasoning or an analogical argument, posits that if two or more things are alike in one aspect, they are probably alike in other relevant ways. This type of reasoning allows us to draw conclusions based on the similarities between different subjects. By comparing two or more items, we can clarify or explain concepts, making them easier to understand. Analogical reasoning can be a powerful persuasive tool, helping us communicate ideas more effectively and compellingly. Key components of an argument from analogy. When constructing an argument from analogy, there are several key components to keep in mind. First one is identifying similarities. The first step is to identify the relevant similarities between the two or more items being compared. This sets the foundation for the argument and helps establish the basis for further claims. Second is establishing premises. An analogical argument typically consists of 2 to 3 premises that outline the similarities. These premises are crucial for establishing the analogy and guiding the reasoning process. Third is drawing conclusions. Once the premises have been established, they are used to arrive at a conclusions. These conclusions suggest that because the items are similar in specific ways, they are likely similar in other relevant respects as well. How to using analogies effectively. Analogies can be powerful tools for explanations and persuasions. So here's how to use them effectively. First one, clarifying concepts. Analogies help explain complex ideas by relating them to something more familiar. For example, comparing the structure of an atom to a solar system can help illustrate how electrons orbit the nucleus, making their concept more accessible. Second is persuasions. When making an argument, analogies can enhance your positions by providing relatable examples. If you argue that just a healthy diet benefits our body, a balanced approach to technology usage can benefit our mental well-being. You draw on a family concept to persuade your audience. Next is limitations of analogical arguments. While analogies can be effective, it's important to recognize their limitations. For the first one is a relevance of similarities. The strength of an analogical argument depends on the relevance and strength of the similarities being drawn. If the similarities are weak or superficial, the argument may fall flat. Second is overgeneralizations. This one, care must be taken not to overextend the analogy. Just because two things are alike in one respect does not mean they are alike in all aspects. This can lead to faulty conclusions. So, arguments from analogy are powerful tools for understanding and persuasion. By highlighting the similarities between different subjects, we can clarify complex ideas and strengthen our arguments.
So next part, we will be moving on to the unstated premises. So what is unstated premises? Unstated premises are premises that are deductive argument requires, but are not clearly stated on the argument. Deductive arguments are very popular and can be rationally persuasive. However, people will not always state all of the premises that their deductive arguments require. So, unstated premises will actually help you to clarify an argument and find another solution because it will reveal many more assumptions that need to be examined, discussed, and either investigate. So, these premises can also be called as unstated premises, missing premises, or hidden assumption. So we take for an example of the unstated premise. So the premise one here are saying that if it's raining, the streets will be wet. Then premise 2 mentioned that it's raining. So the conclusion here should be therefore the streets are wet. So the reasoning here follows a logical structure, which is if the first premise is true and the second premise is also true, then the conclusion will be automatically also true. So what are not stated here is the unstated premises, which is the argument didn't even mention about the rain will make the streets wet, or the rain are causes why the streets are wet. So even though it is not mentioned in the argument or in the conclusion, it is actually unnecessary for argument to work. If someone were to challenge the argument, they might also question what if the streets are covered, or if there's a drainage system that prevents them from getting wet. So the conclusion that we will get from unstated premises is unstated premises are like the foundation of an argument. They will support the conclusion, but it will often left implicit. Identifying them can lead to a deeper understanding of the argument's validity.
By understanding these unstated premises, we can actually critically evaluate and engage in more effective discussion.
Next, I will explain about what are not considered premise. So for the first one is report. Report basically give information or describe something without aiming to prove anything. For example, the school library opens at 9 a.m. This statement informs us of a fact but doesn't have argue or prove another idea. So if it says that the library will open at 9, then it is. There's nothing to be argued about. And then the second one is unsupported assertions. So these are claims made without any evidence or reason to back them up. They don't help to make a logical argument since they stand alone without support. For example, maths is easy. This is just an opinion, not a supporting reason for any argument. So, this is not considered premise as we cannot argue about. This is based on one's opinion and it can of course be different from other people. The next one is conditional statements. Okay, for conditional statements, they are usually in an if then form, like if it rains then the ground will get wet. So for these conditional statements, they set up conditions but don't argue that something is true on their own. For example, if you study, you'll pass the exam. It describes a situation but doesn't directly prove a point about someone's current performance. So it doesn't guarantee that one will pass the exam. So they have to put a condition, which is if you study, then you'll pass the exam. It not 100% guaranteed that he will pass the exam without the study then. The next one is illustrations and examples. So for illustration and examples, it used to make an idea clearer by not to argue for or against something. For example, dogs can be trained to help people. So from this sentence, it clarifies what dogs can do, but isn't arguing on a larger point. So illustrations and examples are used to make an idea easier to understand, but they don't try to prove something right or wrong. Okay, for the last, what is not considered premise is explanations. So for explanations, it clarifies why something happened rather than argue that something new is true. For example, the streets are wet because it rained. This explains why the streets are wet, but doesn't support any new conclusion. So, from this example, we can see that the streets are wet because it rains. It simply tells us that the reason of the streets are wet. It doesn't try to make any new point or try to convince us of anything else.
In examining the nature of reasoning, we discover that it is a multifaceted process that enables us to navigate and understand the world around us. Deductive reasoning stands out as a powerful tool that allows us to draw firm conclusions based on established premises. For instance, when we assert that all humans need oxygen to survive, we can confidently conclude that Sarah, as a human, also needs oxygen. This method of reasoning provides us with certainty and clarity, particularly when dealing with well-defined conditions and universally accepted truth. On the other hand, inductive reasoning introduces different but equally important dimensions to our understanding. It enables us to form generalized conclusions based on repeated observations. For example, if we observe that every swan with a content is a white, we may tentatively conclude that all students are right. While this conclusion is not absolute and carries an element of uncertainty, it allows us to make educated guesses about the world based on the patterns we observe. Together, these two types of reasoning illustrate the spectrum of how we arrive at knowledge. Deductive reasoning offers the assurance of certainty within specific frameworks, while inductive reasoning presents probably conclusions that are grounded in our experiences and observations. This interplay between deductions and inductions not only enriches our understanding of logical thinking, but also enhances our critical thinking skills. It equips us to evaluate arguments more effectively, make informed decisions, and engage in thoughtful discussions. As we embrace both deductive and inductive reasoning in our everyday lives, we cultivate a more nuanced approach to understanding complex issues, ultimately leading to deeper insight and more informed perspective.
Next, ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is used to convey the credibility or trust and authority. For example, if a doctor tells you to eat certain medicine, we will likely listen to him because generally we know that doctor is an expert in this field. Next, pathos. Pathos is more about emotion. For example, a charity commercial plays with viewers' emotion by showing poor and sad animals in need. Next, logos. Logos is more about logic, the audience's sense of reason or logic. For example, a lawyer providing proof and facts in court to support his arguments and verify someone's innocence. To increase your understanding, let's take a look at this video to make you understand more how to differentiate between ethos, pathos, and logos.
How do you persuade someone to see things your way? The Greek philosopher Aristotle had some good ideas on how to persuade people. Among his most powerful techniques were what he called the three appeals, designed to ask an audience to believe his argument. Aristotle called these three appeals ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos appeals to the audience by asking them to trust the person making the argument. Pathos appeals to the audience's emotions, asking them to believe because they care. Logos appeals to the audience's sense of logic and rationality, asking them to believe because the argument makes sense. Using the appeals can make your writing or speaking more persuasive, and if you can spot them when they're being used or misused by others, you can also protect yourself against manipulation. Let's examine the three appeals more closely. First up, ethos. One way to win over a skeptical audience is to convince them that you're trustworthy, knowledgeable, and well-meaning. You can build ethos by referencing relevant experience, by explaining your credentials, or even by using good sources to show that you know your subject. When presenting, dressing and speaking professionally will boost your audience's confidence in you. When writing, making sure your documents have a professional tone and are error-free can also enhance your ethos. Next, we'll address pathos, the appeal to emotion. Many popular movies, books, and songs appeal to emotion. These appeals often engage positive emotions like joy or hope, but other times... No, please. Pathos can engage negative emotions as well. However, in academic writing, a simple tug on the heartstrings won't suffice. To use pathos effectively, incorporate vivid imagery and intentionally emotional and impactful adjectives and verbs. Academics can support their arguments most effectively with logos, an appeal to logic and rationality, by building an argument with facts, figures, and well-thought-out reasoning. By appealing to the audience with logic, you draw your conclusions as rational, rendering the opposition less persuasive, sometimes even as irrational. Not all conclusions are easy to prove though, and the responsibility falls on you to make the case and convince the audience. While many arguments rely on one or two of these methods, some of the most effective use a combination of all three. The most important aspect of persuasive writing is to create a credible line of thought for your message that audiences will follow. If you do it carefully, they very well might arrive at the same conclusion.
Here are some techniques for understanding arguments. So, how to evaluate arguments in a step-by-step manner? So, the first step is identify the conclusion and the premises. You must know which one is conclusion and the premise. Second one, put the argument in a standard form. Third one, decide if the argument is deductive or non-deductive, which is inductive. So, next, you must determine whether the argument succeeds logically. And if the argument succeeds logically, assess whether the premises are true. For premises that are backed up by sub-arguments, repeat all the steps for the sub-arguments. And last but not least, you have to make a final judgment. Is the argument good or bad? So, that's all for the techniques for understanding arguments.
Knowing how to identify arguments is important because the first one, it can help you with your critical thinking because it helps you to think clearly and evaluate your ideas. The second one is for your better communication because you can express your views more effectively and engage in discussion. The third one is because you can have a more informed choice, which is because you can make a better decision by understanding a different perspective from other people. The fourth one is academic success because it will improve your skill in school and research. And the last one is about your civic awareness because it will allow you to participate more thoughtfully in public issues and debates. Overall, knowing this kind of technique will help you to engage with information more effectively. Okay, this is a few of our references that we use in order for us to complete our task. I hope you can also refer to it later. So I think this is the end of our presentation. We hope that you will get a more better understanding after you watch our presentation. So thank you for listening and Assalamualaikum.